When it comes to the SoundCloud era rap, I think one of the biggest misconceptions that a lot of outsiders had at the time is that all of the biggest stars blowing up around the time were doing so basically overnight. I mean, after all, that was basically the SoundCloud dream that was sold to us. You put out a couple songs on the platform, they start to pick up steam, you get noticed by No Jumper and Lyrical Lemonade, get an interview, get a music video, maybe get a couple face tattoos and some colorful hair, and just like that, you're blown up. However, once you start to look a little bit deeper into things, you realize that a lot of the artists that we associate with the rapid blow up were actually working in the underground for multiple years before they ever got their big break. With people like XXXTentacion, Trippie Redd, Tekashi 69, and Lil Uzi Vert. But what about the artists that we really associate with the rapid blow up, like Lil Pump, Smoke Perp, and Lil Xan? Well, it turns out that Lil Xan already had a high profile manager before he ever even dropped his first mixtape. Smoke Perp got signed off of the fact that somebody at a record label heard a song behind the scenes and decided to turn it into a hit, and well, Lil Pump had multiple smaller hits before he really hit it big with Gucci Gang. I'm not saying that they didn't rise to fame very quickly, but when we're talking about instant blow-ups with barely any prior music to show for it, well, there's only a couple examples that I can think of. With one of those being Ugly God, who I already made a video on, so if you want to check that out, be my guest, and the second being YBN Nahmir. Both of these artists barely had any music on the platform before they ended up dropping the hit that would blow them up into the mainstream, with Ugly God having Water and YBN Nahmir having Rubbing Off the Paint. So that means no time grinding it out in the underground, making connections with other artists, playing small time shows, and building up their fan base. They were one day not famous at all or even known, and then the next, they were the biggest star in the entire world. Well, at least for the time. And considering the fact that YBN Nahmir was only 17 years old when he got his massive hit, it definitely had to do something to his brain, because we've seen a big difference between the initial YBN Nahmir who blew up back in 2017 and the Nahmir that we have nowadays. This man really went through an entire villain origin story right before our eyes, and none of us even realized. But today, I really want to look into that story, how he rose to fame so fast, and then how he fell off just as quickly, and where it left him. The trials and tribulations of fame, where he went wrong, the jokes, the memes, the GD to Crip. I want to talk about all of it when we look into the story of YBN Nahmir. Nicholas Alexander Simmons was born December 18th, 1999 in Birmingham, Alabama, into a pretty chaotic environment. You see, from what we know, his father was mostly out of the picture before he was even born, and the duty of raising him was then put off on his mother and his aunt, as well as his stepfather, who was in the picture for a little bit of time. On top of that, his aunt also had a couple kids, and that meant that he grew up with a bunch of cousins in the same household as him, although this type of living arrangement wouldn't last too long because his stepfather actually got into an altercation with one of his cousins, which involved a firearm. And while after things get to that level, you're not exactly going to patch it up, so after that, his stepfather basically left the house and he was left to be raised by two women. And that's pretty well all we know about his early life, as he hasn't really spoke about it too much in interviews for reasons that we're going to talk about a little bit later on in this video. However, besides that one big event, his childhood seemed to be pretty normal, with his family most likely being lower middle class, meaning that they weren't rich, but he was still able to get a lot of things that other kids around his age did. With his two biggest hobbies in his early life being playing basketball with his cousins at the local court, as well as playing video games on his PS2, with his parents giving him a copy of GTA 3 when he was only 3 years old. Which is definitely a very questionable parenting choice, but it did pay off in the long run, so maybe they know better than me. I also want you to keep in mind that Nahmir was born in late 1999, so he was 3 years old in 2002, and around that time a PS2 was like $300 and GTA 3 probably would have been around $60, so the family probably had some money. I don't know why I'm trying to pocket watch a 3-year-old, but anyways, after he played GTA 3, he would immediately fall in love with the series, and after that, he would play every new installment that came out, with him eventually upgrading to San Andreas. And apparently, I didn't know this, but at the time there were online servers for this game on PS2, and this is really how he would get his introduction to the online world. Now trust me, this wasn't GTA 5 online by any means, with it being pretty rudimentary, with only a couple players being able to play together at a time and absolutely no voice chat, meaning that if you want to talk to anybody, you actually had to type it out. However, despite how simplistic this all was, he was actually able to meet a couple friends through San Andreas, including somebody from Texas who was named Jay, but you would probably know him better as Almighty Jay. The two would initially meet through the game, but then would start to talk over Skype voice chat, but it turns out they really didn't like each other at first, then would often diss each other, even creating diss tracks on one another. However, every time that I see a YouTuber make a video about Nahmir, they always put way too much stake into this beef. They were like 12 years old, and they were probably mostly doing it as a joke, and it only lasted for a couple months.
Go and I buy her pro. I put your head into it and it swirls.
However, this supposed diss war would show one another how good they were at rapping, and it wasn't long before they became full-on friends and started playing GTA together almost every day after school. And this is also how Nahmir would get introduced to another underground rapper, although probably one he would rather forget, the infamous troll himself, Jace. Now, I was pretty surprised to learn that these two knew each other back in the day, because to me, Nahmir was really part of the SoundCloud era and Jace is part of the new wave, so it's kind of surprising that they were connected in any way, but at the time, Jace was about like 10 years old and Nahmir was probably 14 to 15. And the reason that they even got connected in the first place is because Jace was actually in a collective with Almighty J that was called Trap Boys Family, and he would often even make cover art for Jay once he started rapping, because after all, both Jace and Jay are from Texas, so they actually knew each other in real life, although him and Nahmir would only meet over the game. And honestly, this would only be a fun fact and not really all that notable if it wasn't for the fact that Jace will come back into the story a little bit later on in a way that Nahmir definitely didn't want him to. However, all of that won't happen for a long while. For now, Nahmir was living pretty good. I mean, after all, he upgraded from the PS2 to an Xbox 360, from San Andreas to GTA 5, which had a much more robust online feature, meaning that he no longer had to rely on Skype to talk to people and could actually full-on communicate with people through the game, playing online with many different people from California. And with the game also being set in California, it would really give Nahmir a love for the state, with him taking most of his musical influence from there. I mean, after all, Alabama doesn't really have any big-time rappers besides Yellow Wolf, which, let's be honest, I don't think YBN Nahmir was all that inspired by him, and Gucci Mane. And don't get me wrong, Gucci Mane is an absolute legend who inspired many rappers over the years, but I think at this point most people associate him more with Atlanta because he grew up there and not with Alabama. He was only really born in Alabama. It's kind of like Rick Ross being born in Florida, but you guys don't care about any of that, so let's keep going. So with no real Alabama rappers to look up to, he would start to listen to a lot of California artists from West Side, with people like Tupac, Eazy-E, and E40. A lot of E rappers, but surprisingly not Big E, although he's not from California. I ain't got no motherfucker. So I fucked your bitch, you fat motherfucker. Which of course would heavily influence his rap style once he started making music professionally, but at this point he didn't want to be a rapper. Instead, he wanted to be a professional gaming YouTuber, which was basically the dream of any person growing up in the early 2010s. With him creating his first ever YouTube channel sometime in 2014 under the name of CapGod, where it seems like he would mostly upload GTA 5 live streams as well as a couple YouTube videos, although unfortunately all of the videos prior to 2017 have now been taken down as he's most likely embarrassed by them. However, from what we can gather, they probably weren't anything all that special. I mean, after all, there's probably a million little YouTube channels with GTA gameplay on them made by 14-year-olds, so you can probably look up any channel like that and get the point of what Nahmir was doing around the time. However, surprisingly, this channel would pick up a little bit of steam, with him gaining around 2,000 subscribers, which in the grand scheme of things isn't really all that much, but when you're 14 years old, having that many subs would definitely inspire you to keep going. I mean, after all, when I was a kid, I got about 100 subscribers and I was basically pissing my pants. I think if I got 2,000, I would have dropped out of school to be a full-on YouTuber, and well, I probably would be doing the same thing that I'm doing now, or maybe I would be living on the street, who knows. That's a joke, by the way, stay in school, kids. But with him gaining this small fan base, he was actually able to start to propel his own music career, because a lot of times when he was doing his GTA 5 live streams, him and Jay would freestyle back and forth, and it would actually bring in quite a few new fans. And on top of that, Nahmir was actually able to make a little bit of money off the channel as well, with him selling promo to upcoming rappers for around $10. Basically, they gave him the money, and then he would give him a shout out on the channel. Nothing all that special, but at the time, it probably did help a couple of these rappers get their name out there in the GTA 5 community. And this is also when he came up with the name Nahmir. Now, the meaning behind this name is actually pretty complicated, surprisingly. Apparently, there was a rapper who went by the name of K Mort, and he had a twin brother whose name was Shamir, and then Nahmir wanted to take that name and add the initial off of his first name, which is Nick, and make Nahmir. Does that make sense? Well, I hope so. And in a funny way, this goes to show that Nahmir was willing to rip people off even from an early age, although considering the fact that he was a basically unknown GTA 5 YouTuber, I don't think anybody really cared that he was running with that name. However, this would become a bit of a pattern for him later on in his career when it comes to more serious things. But don't worry guys, Nahmir didn't rip off the vampire persona from Space Ghost Perp, so honestly he's in the clear. People who have not watched the prior two videos are not going to understand what I'm saying whatsoever. It's an inside joke. Anyways, let's move on. And eventually these freestyles on his GTA live streams would become popular enough with his small fan base that he decided to start dropping music for real, creating a second YouTube channel which he named Nahmir and uploading tracks on there. With the earliest available piece of music that we have from Nahmir being a track called Hood Mentality featuring Almighty J, and honestly, considering the fact that he's 14, it's not all that bad, but it's still pretty bad.
Rule number one, never trust a snake, nigga. They behind your back working with the jank, niggas.
And I would say if you were looking at the two of them at this point, you would say that Jay was the more talented one. I mean, his rapping ability wasn't anything all that special, but he was at least competent.
I'm trying to get rich, I will never do a crowd with a snitch, these hoes is fake.
Where Nahmir was complete dookie, and it would take him years to even learn how to rap on beat, which I'm not really shitting on him for. I mean, after all, he's 15 years old, and he was still probably a better rapper than me at that age, but still, it didn't show a lot of promise. However, despite that, he would drop a couple miscellaneous tracks throughout the rest of 2015, including a remix of a track called Oh Boy by a rapper called Cameron, as well as a track called OVO, showing that he must have been a Drake fan around the time. However, there was pretty massive gaps between the releases of these tracks, showing that he wasn't really taking music all that seriously at the time, with him mostly focusing all of his attention on his YouTube channel and streaming GTA 5, even managing to meet another underground rapper at the time, going by the name of Rico Nasty, which is a pretty interesting connection. However, he would always keep music in his back pocket and would continue to drop music throughout 2016, with him eventually switching over from YouTube to SoundCloud, as after all, in 2016, the app was really picking up steam with artists popping off like Famous Dex, Lil Uzi Vert, and many more. And just like every kid at the time, he wanted to get on that trend, with him dropping his first ever track on the website in March of 2016 with a track called Mop Sticks, not to be confused by Chopsticks, which is a track that Almighty J put out in 2018. If you ever want to tell the two of them apart, well, Chopsticks is a complete banger and Mop Sticks is ass, and there's no real reason to go back and listen to it. I mean, Nahmir's not even really on beat through most of the song.
That chopper, go rat tat.
And unfortunately, his quality of music wouldn't really improve throughout the rest of 2016, with him dropping multiple more tracks on the platform, including Half on a Baby, Spinning, 24, and LA Fitness, as well as a feature with an artist named Drezzo on the track Trouble. And if you really want to torture somebody and waterboarding is completely out of the question, all you really need to do is sit them down and make them listen to Nahmir's early catalog. I'm sure they're going to crack in only a couple minutes time, because all of this music is really offbeat and really bad. But you know what? I actually am going to give Nahmir props for keeping all of this music up on his SoundCloud even to this day. Most artists will take down all of their earliest music once they start to pop off because they become embarrassed by it. But when it comes to the type of videos that I make, it's a lot easier for me to track down music if they still have it up on SoundCloud. So Nahmir really did help me out with that one, so thank you. Soon after dropping those tracks, he put out his first ever mixtape called Believe in the Glow, which has some pretty nice cover art, and that's probably the nicest thing I can say for the project. Once again, all the tracks are pretty offbeat and it's still pretty terrible. So at this point, you would think that Nahmir would give up on music altogether. I mean, after all, it wasn't doing numbers on YouTube or SoundCloud, and it seemed like his streaming career was going in a lot better of a direction. However, it turns out that he was starting to gain a bit of a reputation around his high school for being a rapper, with him already being a pretty popular kid for playing on the school's basketball team, and a lot of kids checking out everything that he was dropping. And honestly, when you're in high school, that's basically all you want out of your music. You want your classmates to notice and say that it's good, so it would inspire him to continue to make music, and eventually he actually would improve. Because once 2016 came to an end and 2017 began, he would drop another mixtape in January going by the name of YBN, and yes, this is where the YBN name comes from. If you don't know what it means, it basically stands for Young Boss, which is not to be confused with YNW, which stands for Young Nipple World. Of course, it doesn't actually stand for nipple, but well, if I say anything that even sounds close to that word, people are going to accuse me of saying it because, well, I have an accent. I said the word knickers in another video, which is what British people call women's underwear, and people completely lost their mind on that one, so you know what, we're going to steer clear. Young Nipple World, Young Boss Nipples, 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 Nipples. And the true meaning behind this name is apparently that YBN Nahmir wanted to own all of his shit. He wanted to be a young boss nipple, because basically he was going to be the boss of his own career if he really made it as a rapper, which would unfortunately become kind of ironic later on, but for right now things were going pretty well. They put out the mixtape, YBN Almighty J would join the group and take on the acronym as well, and the two of them ended up dropping a song together off of the project, which was called Stacked Up, which actually ended up doing pretty well on SoundCloud. I mean, I'm not saying it got 100,000 plays or anything, but it got around 1,000 to 2,000, which had to feel pretty good for the time. However, it seems like this group was going to be pretty short-lived, as they were both in their senior year at this point, and after Almighty J finished high school, he was actually going to join the army, meaning that he wouldn't be able to make music with Nahmir anymore. So if he really wanted to make it as a rapper, now was the time. However, it seems like once again he would take a step back from music and start focusing on his YouTube channel again, with him making these kind of weird skit videos where he would basically cosplay as different people, including 21 Savage, which is a pretty interesting connection considering the fact that the two of them would eventually meet in real life. And it was around this time that Nahmir ended up discovering another young and pretty poppin' rapper rapper from Maryland going by the name of Simba, who was starting to gain a lot of buzz for his music videos, with him getting views up in the hundreds of thousands. And the reason that he was gaining so much popularity is because he was so young, but he seemed to be so entrenched in gang culture, which was pretty shocking at the time during 2017. Nowadays the gimmick is pretty played out, but at the time people really wanted to see young kids who were really about that life, so Simba got in at the right time. So of course Nahmir would reach out to him, and he even got to know his older brother Tundra, who would later go on to be known as YBN Corday, with the three of them connecting online and talking from time to time. However, I would argue that Nahmir took a little bit more than inspiration from Simba, because if you look at both of their music videos side by side, you can kind of see a similar theme here. I mean, I'm not saying that Simba came up with the whole young rapper being a gangster persona. I mean, you got people like Chief Keef and multiple others, I'm sure. However, it's not really the shared persona that I'm taking issue with here. It's more so the fact that their music videos seem to be shot very similarly, and not to mention the fact that Nahmir would kind of switch his style around this time to something that sounded a lot more like Simba than what he was doing previously.
You know I keep a drum like I would never lead a back. Rocket in my pocket, socket called a pocket rocket.
But all of that is really speculation. Maybe he was already going to make this type of music before he met Simba. Maybe he was inspired by GTA Online and that's why he decided to take on the gangster persona, which really calls into question if he ever was in a gang at any point in his life, with a lot of people saying that he spent all of his time as a kid playing GTA Online and growing up on the streets of Los Santos and was never really about that. And honestly, I would tend to agree with that, considering the fact that in interviews he never really talked about doing gangbanging during his childhood.
I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. It impacted my music in good ways and bad ways, you feel me? Like, the street shit I had along with shit, but, like, you feel me? It kind of brought me to the top of where I'm at right now.
But maybe he wanted to keep it on the low. We could give him the benefit of the doubt, or at least I can, but the rest of the internet wouldn't be so kind later on in his career. But for right now, it didn't really matter, as after all, he was still very small. Most kids rap about gangster shit when they first start off, and nobody really calls it into question, so it wasn't a big deal. However, it seems like him switching up his persona actually would pay off in the long run, because not long after this, he ended up creating the track that would change his life forever, going by the name of Rubbing Off the Paint. Now, I want to make it very clear that everything I spoke about before this point really wasn't shit when it comes to Nahmir. I mean, I know a lot of people are probably going to say, you said that he blew up overnight with one song with no prior music, but you just talked about a bunch of prior music. But what you really got to understand is at this point, you couldn't even consider Nahmir underground. It wasn't like he was doing shows or connecting to people in a city. It wasn't like he had any hits on SoundCloud or YouTube. He was basically like any other kid from 2015 to 2018, dropping random tracks on SoundCloud to very little fanfare. And I'm sure anybody who's watching this who grew up around that time probably knows 10 failed rappers who ended up dropping music in high school and then gave up after they became an adult. And you probably also know that one guy who's still trying to make music when he's like 24 to 25 years old who really needs to give it up. But anyways, so in any other world, YBN Nahmir would just be another random failed rapper on SoundCloud who ended up living a normal life and completely forgetting about this altogether. But with Rubbing Off the Paint, everything would change. With him going on to show a snippet of the song to a bunch of people from his high school as well as all his online friends, and immediately the reaction was completely different to all his prior music. I mean, before this point, his friends were basically humoring him. They thought it was kind of cool that he was a rapper, but they probably didn't really fuck with the music that he was making. But with Rubbing Off the Paint, they actually liked it. And this showed Nahmir that he actually had a genuine hit on his hands, and that if he could market it in the right way and get it in front of the right audience, it might actually become a hit. As after all, late 2017 was basically the gold rush when it came to SoundCloud rap. I mean, there have been many people who blew up before this point, but from around August to December of that year, we had people blow up like Lil Xan, Little Skies, Little Mosey, Tekashi 6ix9ine, and even Juice WRLD. So if Nahmir really wanted the chance to become part of this movement, this was basically the last opportunity to do so. So he would pull together all the money that he had made from promoting people on his YouTube channel, hit up all of his online friends to also get their money involved, and then turned his attention to promoters that might be able to get his music out there. I mean, there was Elevator, but he would probably have to pay them thousands of dollars to get on there, World Star Hip Hop, which would also be thousands of dollars, so the only real place that he could focus his attention on was No Jumper. And I hear what you're saying, how the hell would he be able to get on No Jumper? I mean, after all, at this point in late 2017 to 2018, they were basically at their peak, only interviewing the most poppin' rappers in the game, and definitely not giving any attention to small-time artists like Nahmir. Well, it turns out that No Jumper was actually running a live stream around the time where if you paid only only $10, you could actually get your music in front of Adam 22 and his pretty massive audience at the time. Although the only catch is that you actually had to have a music video as well, because he didn't want to listen to straight audio. He actually wanted to see the people behind the music. So Nahmir did exactly what he had to by shooting a very amateur music video for the song, before then uploading it onto his personal channel, before then using all the money and connections that he had made during his time online to spam the chat with paid submissions in hopes that Adam 22 would actually notice and listen to the song. And against all odds, he actually did. And after the song got played for the first time, surprisingly, many people in the chat that weren't even associated with YBN Nahmir or anybody on the crew would actually start to pay for it to be played again and again and again and again. And just like that, the music video would go from only having around 50 views on YouTube to 100 to 1,000 to 2,000 to 5,000. And of course, that would catch the attention of many people at his high school who would start listening to the song, getting it spread all around his hometown. And before long, YBN Nahmir was an honest to God rising star in the SoundCloud wave, with only one popping song that just so happened to get enough attention on No Jumper to become a hit. However, it probably wouldn't have gone as far as it did if it wasn't for the fact that Elevator actually ended up hitting up Nahmir and asking if they could post a music video on their channel, which he actually ended up turning down, surprisingly. I mean, it's pretty insane that Elevator would actually reach out to him and he didn't have to reach out to Elevator, but it turns out that he had a much better opportunity, because Worldstar Hip Hop would actually reach out to him and ask to shoot an entirely new music video for the song and then post it on the channel. And of course, that was an offer that he couldn't refuse. Worldstar Hip Hop was one of the biggest music sharing platforms in the world at the time, and his little YouTube channel was never going to get the attention that a platform like that would. So he took down the music video on his own channel, ended up shooting a new one, and then it got uploaded on Worldstar only a week later and immediately became a massive hit. It went from 1,000 to 100,000 to 1,000,000 to 10 million to 20, and just overall became a certified hit. I mean, this track was so big that it actually ended up hitting the Billboard Hot 100 and even peaked at number 55, as well as being gold certified before the year was even over. But why? What was it about this track that made it so popular? Was it really that good? Well, surprisingly, it actually is a really good song. He really upped the quality on his music at this point, but there was definitely more factors that led to its success than just quality of music. First of all, it came out about 2 months after Tay-K ended up putting out his infamous track, The Race. Now, if you don't know about this, I think I've described it multiple times in other videos, but I'll run through it real quick right here. Basically, Tay-K was a young rapper who ended up getting caught up on some pretty serious charges, including armed robbery as well as and after he ended up getting caught for that, he was placed on house arrest with an ankle monitor, but he realized that there was no way that he was going to beat the case, so he decided to cut off the ankle monitor and run away. And while he was on the run from the police, he would actually end up shooting a music video for a track called The Race, where he talked about how he wasn't going to beat the case, so he did the race, and he would even pose beside his own mugshot. And of course, this became a massively viral moment in the hip-hop community, with new and old rappers all coming together to talk about just how crazy it was for him to run away from the police and shoot a music video at the same time, although unfortunately it wouldn't be long before he ended up getting caught up and placed back under arrest. And at this point, there was no way they were going to let him get away with going back on house arrest, so they ended up putting him in jail for the foreseeable future. And with him not having all that much music recorded, there wasn't really a whole lot of follow-up when it came to Tay-K's career, which left a lane open for any young gangster rapper to take at any point. And well, Nahmir came right at the right time to fill that spot, with everybody looking at him as the replacement for Tay-K. Not to mention, there was actually a line in the song that said, "Free Lil Tay, no he keep a K, but he not take K," which a lot of people interpreted as a diss towards Tay-K, which only created more discussion around the song.
Free Lil Tay, no he keep a K, but he not take K of the chop and let it blow. Watch this bitch heat his face.
Not to mention the popularity of Rick and Morty in 2017, with him also having a line that referenced them, as well as the cover art being inspired by the show. It was becoming a little bit more popular around the time for rappers to reference their favorite cartoons, but it hadn't really hit that mainstream level until Rubbing Off the Paint. So a lot of people who probably never listened to rap music before in their life, writing it off as only gangster music that didn't really have anything to do with their lifestyle, ended up tuning into the song to see what he was saying about Rick and Morty, and well, like I said, it's a hit. And just like that, at the age of 17, Nahmir went from being a struggling YouTuber doing rap as a hobby to one of the hottest new artists in the entire game. And his life would start to change immediately, with him actually even getting kicked out of high school despite the fact that he was a pretty solid student. Apparently the school really didn't like the fact that he was toting guns in the music video, so they told him that he could no longer go to classes, but he could do online classes if he wanted to. But Nahmir basically said fuck that, ended up paying somebody to finish out his classes, and immediately moved to LA to pursue a rap career full on. And you would think at this point he would leave all all of his boys from the Xbox party chat behind. I mean, after all, most people after they blow up as a rapper leave their in real life friends behind, and they're definitely not thinking about the people that they know online. But well, Nahmir was built different, with him immediately hitting up Jay and telling him that he shouldn't join the army and instead should move to LA with him to pursue a rap career. And well, Jay of course took the opportunity, not even telling his mom. On top of that, he also brought along 2 other members going by the name of YBN Manny as well as YBN Glizzy. Now these guys never really dropped a whole lot of music, however they would be pretty influential behind the scenes when it came to building up the YBN brand. So just like that, he was putting all of his people in better positions than they would have been if it wasn't for him blowing up. And it just goes to show the type of person that Nahmir was at this point. I mean, he wasn't getting a big head, he wasn't leaving everybody in the dust or spending all of his newfound money on stupid stuff like designer clothes or fancy cars. And with him having all these friends that he knew before he was famous, it meant that he would stay grounded and probably not lose himself in the crazy world of LA and being a poppin' rapper. Although unfortunately things would start to go wrong almost immediately, because whoever his manager was at the time actually ended up selling the beat for Rubbing Off the Paint to an unnamed label who was basically trying to use that to extort Nahmir to sign a deal with them, which definitely would have been undervalued. However, he would take to his Instagram story to air them out, and I don't think he ever ended up taking this deal, so that wasn't too big of a deal, but it would go to show that there was a lot of shit going on behind the scenes with the YBN brand even when it first got started. However, despite the couple issues that he was going through behind the scenes, Rubbing Off the Paint would only get bigger and bigger, with it getting remixes by Almighty J, which would help to put him on the map, as well as bigger rappers like Bryson Tiller, Vince Staples, which is not to be confused with Vic Mensa.
They say stay woke, still slept with the Rugers. Only time you bear arms is in the wife beater. Loser, your favorite rapper's a domestic abuser.
You this.
DDG and even Bad Baby ended up remixing the track, and Nahmir would actually hop on the trend as well, with him remixing Gucci Gang by Lil Pump as well as The Race by TK, with that getting a music video on the World Star Hip Hop channel as well, which ended up doing numbers. Not long after that, him and Jay ended up dropping a track together called No Hook, which would get a music video on Nahmir's personal channel, which got 3 million views overnight and got Jay a lot more attention than before, and honestly rightfully so, because this is one of the best tracks in both of their catalogs.
Flipping work, then I'm on that kick of dope shit.
But you are starting to see that he's focusing a lot more attention on putting his boys on rather than focusing on his own solo career, which isn't a bad thing to do when it comes to your friends, but at the same time it probably was confusing a couple of his fans with so many new members joining the YBN crew every day. However, investing in Jay definitely was a good idea, because he ended up making headlines later that year for dating Black China, which only got more attention on the YBN crew, so in the long run I guess it was worth it. After that, he would drop another music video on his personal channel for the track Bailout, which ended up hitting 3 million views, as well as another track and music video on World Star Hip Hop called Letter to the Valley Part 5, which ended up hitting an impressive 10 million views, before Nahmir finally finished off the year by performing at Rolling Loud. And this is actually where he ended up meeting Corday in person for the first time, with him asking him to join the YBN crew not long after that. However, at this point it was a little bit more low-key. Some people knew that he was in the crew, but they didn't really know too much about him, as after all, like I said, they already had YBN Manny, Almighty J, Glizzy, and now Corday. And with Jay and Nahmir rapping so similarly, I don't think a lot of people were all that excited for a new member to join that was going to make the same style of music, although Corday would blow everybody away once he finally started to roll out his own career in April of 2018. But for right now, Nahmir had to focus on himself. I mean, after all the tracks that he put out after Rubbing Off the Paint never ended up charting on the Billboard Hot 100, and he really needed to make a follow-up hit. With him immediately starting off the year of 2018 by dropping a track on World Star Hip Hop called Popped Up, which got an impressive 5 million views, but definitely wasn't the follow-up hit to Rubbing Off the Paint that people were looking for. However, that would come only a couple days later when he ended up dropping a track and music video on Lyrical Lemonade for his track Bounce Out with that. And of course, with the combined cloud of both the channel and YBN Nahmir put together, the music video ended up running up an impressive 144 million views, and it was even one of the biggest music videos on the entire channel at one point. And even to this day, I think it's still in the top 20 biggest music videos on the entire channel. So needless to say, it was a pretty big hit and a pretty decent follow-up to Rubbing Off the Paint, although unfortunately it wouldn't make it onto the Billboard Hot 100. However, despite that, the track would make it onto the Bubbling Under charts, which is still pretty impressive for an upcoming rapper, and it was certified platinum by the end of the year, so needless to say, his career was still in a pretty good spot. And if you want to know just how popping YBN Nahmir was in early 2018, he actually accidentally created the career of another big SoundCloud rapper going by the name of Comethazine, because at this point, with his music doing so well on streaming platforms, he decided to completely abandon SoundCloud SoundCloud and only upload his music on Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube, you know, places that you can actually get paid. However, it was kind of a bad idea to not upload it on there because it meant that other people would be able to re-upload his music and gain all the plays that he should be getting, and one person in particular who did that was actually Comethazine. He would end up re-uploading the track on SoundCloud and gaining millions of views before then using a little known loophole on SoundCloud where you can actually switch out the audio on a track without having to take it down and reset the views, with him putting his own track on there going by the name
Bands, that's our check.
and it now looked like he had a song with millions and millions of views, and after that he basically blew up. So yeah, in a weird way, TK kind of ended up putting on Nahmir unintentionally, and then Nahmir ended up putting on Comethazine unintentionally, so I guess he's given back. Not long after that, Nahmir ended up signing a deal with Atlantic Records before then making his way onto the XXL freshman list for 2018, back when people actually used to care about that, which would help him gain a connection with other upcoming rappers like Blockboy JB and Wi-Fi's Funeral. In fact, the two of them ended up putting out a track together later in the year going by the name of Juveniles, and honestly I'm only mentioning this because that song is very underrated and I feel like you should listen to it if you never have before. On top of that, he set off the career of YBN Corday, saying that if people gave him enough followers on Instagram they were going to drop a music video, which was actually a remix of Eminem's song My Name Is, and this track would actually get a music video on World Star Hip Hop, which had a cameo by both Almighty J and Nahmir, although unfortunately it has been taken down because Corday said something about Diddy and he didn't want that out there anymore, but if you want to watch it, it's been re-uploaded. And I would say this is probably the peak of Nahmir's career, although once again, behind the scenes, things weren't going so well, because unbeknownst to him, Almighty J actually ended up signing away the rights of YBN to a janky manager who went and copyrighted the name behind all of their backs, which meant that the entire time that they were trying to build up this rap group, they didn't even have the rights to the name, which would cause a lot of issues down the road, but Nahmir didn't even know that at the time. After that, in June, he would get another music video on Lyrical Lemonade when he featured on the track Riding by Young Bands, which also featured Lil Skies, once again forming two more connections for him. That was then followed up by the entire group hopping on a No Jumper podcast where they announced that they were going to do a compilation mixtape together as well as a tour all across Europe. And that mixtape actually ended up dropping in September, although it was kind of weird that Corday didn't really appear that much on the project. Apparently it was because it was all recorded before he joined the group, although at this point it had been about 6 months since he had been part of it, so he definitely had time to record at least a couple tracks. And that combined with the fact that they were kind of awkward on the No Jumper podcast led a lot of people to speculate if this group was even going to be able to stay together, as it seemed like they didn't really get along all that well. However, it's not like Corday wouldn't contribute anything to the project at all, because he would put his two biggest hits on it with both Alaska and Kung Fu, which were blowing up on both World Star Hip Hop and Lyrical Lemonade respectfully. And Nahmir actually ended up doing the same thing, which was a pretty big gamble. I mean, after all, he definitely could have saved Rubbing Off the Paint and bounced out with that for his own solo project and not put it on the group mixtape, but it seems like he really believed in the crew and wanted to put everything that he had into it, so he put them on there. And the project itself had a pretty impressive roster of features, with Machine Gun Kelly hopping on a remix of Bounce Out with that, as well as Wiz Khalifa, Gucci Mane, and even Chris Brown. And the project even ended up peaking on the Billboard Hot 100 at number 21, as well as selling a really impressive 67 million first week sales. Although let's be honest, a lot of that probably came from all the prior streams that Rubbing Off the Paint and Bounce Out with that got, but despite that, it was still a pretty successful project, and it seemed like the YBN crew was only getting bigger and bigger, with them immediately heading off on the European tour. However, unfortunately, this is where the friction between YBN Corday and Nahmir would really start to build up. We're not really sure what they got in a fight over, but they would talk about getting in a fight on the European tour. And while this fight wouldn't lead to the end of the relationship immediately, it definitely would put a bit of pressure on them, which definitely wasn't good considering the fact that the crew had really only come together a couple months before this point, and it already seemed like they were going to break up. And with Nahmir investing a lot of his time into building the group up and not his own solo career, it really had to hurt to see that the people that he put on weren't giving him the same respect that he was giving to them. And this eventually led him to take a little bit of a step back from music, as after all, he wasn't really able to get high when he was in Europe because he couldn't find the backwoods that he was used to smoking. So he started thinking about his entire life, his career, his future, his family, friends, and everything in between. And he decided that if he was going to continue in the world of music, he was going to have to carry himself differently. So so he took a little bit of a break, which was a good idea for his mental health, but when it came to the timing of his career, this could not have been a worse choice. Because during the time that Nahmir took a step back, Cordae would really start to peak in popularity, with the entire industry looking at him as a prodigy, with him getting co-signs from people like Dr. Dre, P. Diddy, and even J. Cole. And with Nahmir and Cordae being signed to the same management as well as the same label, it meant that they were focusing more attention on him and basically leaving Nahmir in the dust while he was contemplating his life. So by the time that 2019 rolled around, Cordae was dropping Grammy-nominated projects with features with people like Chance the Rapper, while Nahmir hadn't even dropped a project yet. And I do gotta kind of feel for him at this point. I mean, he blew up so fast that he didn't really have time to think about everything that was going on around him, and when he actually took a minute to slow down and try to contemplate, basically the world passed him by. However, in his personal life, things did seem to be going better because he ended up getting into a long-term relationship with a YouTuber going by the name of Salt, who had previously dated FouseyTube at one point. I'm not really sure if she left FouseyTube to get with Nahmir. It seems like Fousey thinks that's the case, but either way, they ended up staying together for a couple years, and it seemed like their relationship was pretty healthy. Also, if you don't know who FouseyTube is, well, look him up and go down a rabbit hole.
I have bipolar and depression. That what you put into my head made me want to kill.
I felt gay.
Nahmir's hiatus away from music would finally come to an end in March of 2019 when he ended up returning to World Star Hip Hop to drop a track called Baby 8, which ended up doing a pretty solid 3 million views, which is still pretty solid, but it was definitely a step down from the tens of millions of views that he was getting in the prior year, and at this point it seemed like his wave was kind of dying down. So now would really be the time for him to keep his foot on the gas and start dropping non-stop music videos, as well as putting out a debut mixtape at some point during 2019. I mean, it still would have been a little bit late, but at least he would have some sort of body of music for his fans to chew on. However, after that, he didn't really end up dropping a whole lot until the summer of 2019, when he ended up putting out another music video on World Star Hip Hop called Opistapa, which was only a minute-long song. And a lot of people would comment on the fact that it seemed like YBN Nahmir wasn't trying anymore, and that a minute-long song was a really lazy idea. But what people didn't realize at the time is that this song being so short would actually become a blessing in the following years, after a little known app would blow up in 2020, with this song gaining a lot of popularity on there. But for now, the song basically didn't really get all that much attention. After that, he ended up dropping a track and music video for a song called Fuck It Up, which featured the City Girls and Tyga, which ended up pulling an impressive 4 million views. But in the grand scheme of the rap game, I didn't really hear a whole lot of people talk about this song, so maybe it was more for the girls, not really sure. I mean, at this point, he was gaining a bit of a new audience by dating Salt, with him appearing in a bunch of her YouTube videos, which of course got a lot of new eyes on him from a different type of fan base than what he was used to. On top of that, he would also start screaming GTA, showing that he was still pretty interested in creating content. And both of these things were pretty successful ventures, with a lot of people thinking that he might step away from music altogether to pursue a career in streaming, as after all, that's what he wanted to do in the first place, and well, he wasn't really all that popular in the rap game anymore. With him basically going completely quiet on the music front again until March of 2020, when he finally dropped the lead single off of his debut album, which was called Two Seater, featuring both Offset and G-Eazy, which did a very impressive 9 million views on YouTube, as after all, those are some pretty big name features. And you would think with him dropping such a little amount of music throughout 2019, he wouldn't really have a fan base left at all, but it turns out that a lot of people stuck through and were waiting to see his debut album, with them hoping that he might have a comeback. However, unfortunately, right when it looked like he might get a second wind in the rap game, the COVID-19 pandemic would break out, meaning that he was now stuck in his house at all times, and he would quickly develop a taste for alcohol, becoming an alcoholic in only a couple months. And yes, I know you're always an alcoholic, it's just when you drink for the first time it activates. I don't need people saying you don't understand addiction twisted, but yeah, Nahmir became an alcoholic. And because of that, his ambition to make music would start to slow down. He would also go on live stream a bunch of times completely drunk out of his mind, which only helped to embarrass his image even more. And this is really when the trend of shitting on fallen off SoundCloud rappers would kick off in a big way, with Smoke Perp putting out a project called Florida Jit, which only sold 4.5 copies in its first week, which was very embarrassing for him. After that, people were basically looking for their next victim, going after Boot Gang for falling off, going after Lil Pump, going after Lil Xan, basically any SoundCloud rapper that they could make fun of, they were going to. And this is when all the memes about Nahmir being a fake gangster really started to pop off, with people saying that he grew up on GTA and was not really a GD like he claimed. GD stands for Gangster Disciple, by the way. However, all of that would quickly get overshadowed by Cordae dropping the YBN letters off of his name on Instagram, which immediately started speculation that the group was breaking up for good. And Nahmir would confirm the rumors by putting out a couple tweets that said that YBN was over and that the other two members had left it in the dirt and he was the only one that was still riding with it, which of course set the internet on fire, with everybody everybody coming out against Corday, saying that he was a fake for basically riding Nahmir's wave and then leaving him in the dust. Corday would try to clarify by saying that he did call Nahmir before he dropped the letters and Nahmir said it was okay, but it seems like he was drunk out of his mind when he made those tweets, so they came off a lot more aggressive than they should have been. However, despite that, it seems like everybody took Nahmir's side and he had more goodwill than he had in multiple years at this point. And on top of that, all throughout 2020, Opastapa was gaining more and more traction on TikTok, with it eventually becoming the biggest song on the platform in November of that year, meaning that he would re-release it as well as doing a remix with 21 Savage. After that, he would immediately hop back on the No Jumper podcast to hype up the release of his debut album, which he was going to call Visionland, as well as going on DJ Vlad to talk about it a little bit. He then capitalized on the success of Opastapa by putting out a music video with 21 Savage for the remix, which ended up doing really good numbers and even made it onto the charts. And at this point, it seemed like all the pieces were coming together for the perfect comeback for Nahmir. I mean, after all, he had blown up in 2017, he had the biggest year of his life in 2018, and then 2019 he went a little bit quiet before building himself back up in 2020 and finally making his way back in the mainstream in 2021 when he finally dropped his debut album. And all he had to do was stick the landing. As long as this project was at least competent, not even good, at least competent, he probably would have had the big comeback that he was looking for. I mean, there was some expectations for the project, as after all, 3 years into his career, I don't think a lot of people want to hear that same old flow. They probably wanted to hear something new, but what they got, they never could have predicted. Because right when YBN Nahmir got his second chance, something so rare to get in the rap game, I mean, most people never even get that first shot, so a second shot is even more rare, and to be honest, this is almost like his third shot at this point, but anyways, he blew it. And how did he do that, you ask? Well, Soul Train. Listen to it for yourself.
If I gave you all my love, I say, would that make you happy, baby?
If I gave you all my love. Yeah, it was terrible, and immediately people would start to clown on him, with it turning into a trend where everybody in the rap game, both new and old, was once again talking about Nahmir, but not for good reasons. I mean, Lil Yachty came out and clowned him, saying that it was the best song of the year, before them revealing that it was an April Fool's joke and it was actually terrible. Nahmir then tried to hop on and say that it was the best song of the year, which Yachty would immediately shut down, saying,
"My nigga, chill."
Yeah. On top of that, the album itself really wasn't anything all that impressive, and it only ended up selling 4K first week, which was even worse than Florida Jit. And to make matters even worse, his own best buddy Almighty Jay would kick him while he was down by going on a live stream and talking shit about the song, saying that it was terrible, which was definitely pretty uncalled for. I mean, the song is bad, we all know that it's bad, but you really don't have to speak about it publicly. And once Nahmir saw how bad the reception for this project was, he would immediately try to play damage control by saying that he would put out another project called Visionland 2, which would have the more gangster type music that people were used to, although at this point nobody wanted to hear that. After that, he would immediately drop a bunch of music videos on his personal channel in hopes of bringing fans back, but at this point it was too little too late, and well, people weren't really fucking with it anymore. And sadly, this was already destined to happen. I mean, Nahmir had mixing problems all through his career, with him putting out a track in 2020 called Wake Up, which became infamous for the line, "I wake up and get to them racks."
I seen them hate when I was down. They never thought that I would blow up and get them rags.
I slammed my penis in the car door.
So he really should have had a talk with his engineer then, but he didn't learn, and then an abomination like Soul Train ended up coming out. Now, I'm not saying a good mix could have saved this song. Honestly, it should have never been released, but it probably could have been at least a little bit better if it was mixed more properly. But sadly, the damage was already done, and this was really the end of YBN Nahmir, or at least the YBN Nahmir that we all knew and loved. The friendly rapper who was willing to put his friends on and really do everything for his collective, not being selfish and focusing on himself, was completely gone, with him announcing that he would take a step back from music for a while to try to figure himself out, as well as revealing that he had been struggling with alcoholism as well as addiction to weed after he quit alcohol, meaning that basically he couldn't sleep or eat if he wasn't smoking. And if all of that wasn't bad enough, if that wasn't enough to break a man, with the entire internet clowning on him, addiction, friends stabbing him in the back, his long-term girlfriend also also ended up leaving him for another man right when they were getting ready to have a baby together. Yes, that's something that would turn anybody into a supervillain. And of course, the internet made fun of him for it, because that's what the internet does. And from all this relentless mockery and trolling, a new YBN Nahmir was born. Somebody who was a lot more hateful, somebody who was a lot more angry, and somebody who wanted to be a gangster. Now remember, YBN Nahmir was already a gangster. I mean, he was a gangster disciple. That's what he had been saying for years at this point. But all of a sudden, he decided to start saying that he was a Crip, which confused a lot of people online, as after all, you can't really hop from set to set. I mean, people definitely do it, but it's very frowned upon, and all of the people who were previously making fun of Nahmir were now actually angry with him. But Nahmir wouldn't stop there, because he also went on Instagram Live to get in a fight with Jay. Apparently this was over money, where Nahmir found himself in a situation where he needed to pay somebody $40K, and Jay ended up gifting him $30K of that, but then Nahmir never paid it back. And as soon as Jay tried to press Nahmir on this, he would immediately get upset, saying that he was gonna smoke him, he was gonna pop him, all this gangster shit, and Jay would immediately see through that, saying, hey man, I've known you forever, you're like a brother to me, and I know you're not a gangster.
I'm gonna have to put them bitches
Listen,
on like a high,
you like a brother to me. I don't want to be on no gangster shit with you.
None of that,
I want to get in the ring and I want to box.
I'm gonna listen. You know what happened last time?
It sound good. It sound good. Let's do it in front of everybody.
It sound good, nigga. It sound good to me.
Let's do it in front of everybody. I'm with it.
Do it in front of everybody, bro. You one of them type.
Come on, man.
You gonna do it in front of everybody though?
Listen, you like a brother to me. I ain't on no gangster shit with you, nigga. You know I love you, bro. I just want to get in the ring and box.
Yeah, I'ma beat the fuck out you.
I sound good. Let's get it set up.
The shit out you too.
They would then try to set up a boxing match, but apparently Nahmir really didn't want to fight with Jay, and I don't really blame him. Did you see what Jay did to Skinny from the 9? I mean, I wouldn't want to fuck with those hands either. And after that live ended, Jay ended up going on his YouTube channel and doing kind of an exposed video on Nahmir, saying that he owed him money, that he wasn't actually a gangster, and that he never popped anybody.
Where that shit came from, you not like that, bro. You went live and said you pop niggas. You don't pop niggas. You went live and said you whoop niggas. You don't whoop niggas. You went live and said niggas know how you get down. Nobody know how you get down. What the fuck is you talking about?
Which once again went on to create a meme with Jay saying you don't pop nipples, and that only brought more scrutiny onto Nahmir, with people not only making fun of him, but now seeing him as a fake friend who was stealing money from his own homies. And around this time, he was also doing paid promo, leading a lot of people to think that he actually went broke, which I wouldn't really agree with at the time, but seeing as how in recent years he's actually gained a bit of a reputation for scamming random clothing brands on Instagram, so much to the point that people even fake DMs with him to try to promote their own stuff, I could see him going broke. But at the same time, I'm not going to hate on a man for doing paid promo. I mean, after all, if you're getting paid to do it, you need the money, or if you don't need the money, I mean, who's going to turn down $5,000? And things would only get worse for him in 2022 when he ended up hopping in the DMs of a random troll and basically saying that he was going to fight him, kill his mom, and a bunch of other deranged shit, which was not a good look by any means. I mean, everybody gets annoyed by trolls, but you're definitely taking it too far by doing that.
Infiltrate Crip Street, all that out, bro. You're from Fort Worth, bro. Like, let's be honest, nigga. I'm from North Long Beach. I'm from 2NGC. Like, bro, I really over, bro. Like, nigga, do you filthy? Like, really beat your nigga. All that little lifting weights and all that is out. Like, that do not matter. Nigga really good, bro. And then shoot you in your face right after, cuz, like, come to Fort Worth and beat your ass and shoot my house up, dude. Be honest with yourself.
Although Nahmir did inspire comethazine, and if you've ever seen what comethazine says to his fans, it would definitely make what Nahmir said look like light work, although I can't show it, so look it up for yourself. And with him reacting to trolls in this way, it was only a matter of time before he ended up getting caught in a situation where he looked goofy, with a figure from his past that he probably mostly forgot about at this point coming back to try to troll him once again, and that is, of course, Jace. Basically, Jace was talking shit about him on a live stream, and for some reason, Nahmir decided to hop in the comments and actually get on live, where he was immediately pressed for set hopping, only for him to respond to the allegations by saying it happened, which once again led everybody to laugh at him and created another meme. So at this point, Nahmir was basically a lolcow.
All right, I'm gonna let you talk. How you went from GD to Crip?
How I went from GD to Crip? It happened.
Bro, what the fuck? What the fuck?
There is no way on fire, dude. There is no way.
You don't.
And whenever Nahmir's name came up in conversation after that point, that's basically all people had to say about him, is that it happened. I mean, it became a meme, but when it came to his career, it didn't really help his numbers at all. The only time that he kind of popped up in the news is when he ended up putting out a track called Dead Wrong, where in the music video he could be seen grinding on stuff and rubbing himself on the floor, which I guess is kind of funny, but he's definitely intentionally making bad music at this point, which kind of takes the humor out of it. He also ended up putting out a follow-up project that was called Fast Car Music, although nobody really talked about it and it basically fell on deaf ears. On top of that, his music videos really started to underperform, with them barely able to get 1 million views. And don't get me wrong, I would definitely love to get 1 million views on any of my videos, but at the same time, for a big poppin' rapper like him, those numbers were not very good. And that probably would have been the end of the story of YBN Nahmir, just the rapper who blew up way too fast, couldn't handle all the fame, ended up getting fucked over by his boys before eventually burning out and then becoming a meme and then fading away altogether. I mean, it's not the best career, but if he saved his money and invested it in the right spots, he could still be rich to this day. And I mean, after all, Smoke Perp basically went through the same thing, and nowadays nobody's really clowning on him anymore, so Nahmir could have recovered in some way. I mean, he probably would have never been a poppin' rapper again, but he could have live streamed, he could have done interviews, he could have been famous in some way as a micro celebrity, but unfortunately he decided to take a different path. Because Nahmir ended up hiring on a manager who I guess is kinda infamous if you're from the Netherlands. The guy goes by the name of Armo, but over here he's known as Rari because he ended up changing his name after he moved to America. He basically gained his initial attention and money online by being a prank channel in the Netherlands, where basically he would fuck with people, and unlike American pranksters, people over there really don't fuck with disrespect in public, so he was very hated. But after the adpocalypse hit and all the money dried up on that, he decided to jump on the bandwagon of SoundCloud rappers, with him actually getting a track with Tekashi 6ix9ine before he ended up going to prison. And this track would even get a music video on World Star Hip Hop, which you would think would be a big deal. I mean, after all, 6ix9ine was the biggest rapper in the world in 2018, World Star Hip Hop was his main platform where he was dropping music, but it seems like most people didn't really pay attention. After that, Rari would try his best to get a career off the ground by getting features from Soulja Boy, as well as Lil Xan, Smoke Perp, and multiple others, but nobody ever paid that much attention to him, and at this point, he's basically a low-level clout chaser. This is kind of what I talked about in my video where I talked about the most embarrassing SoundCloud fall-offs. There's levels to a fall-off. I mean, Smoke Perp, that's pretty embarrassing. You would probably think it doesn't get much worse than that. You get clowned on for doing a bad freestyle, you get clowned on for having an album that doesn't sell well, and you can't even sell out a small little warehouse in Idaho. I mean, that's pretty bad. But then you go down to people like the Island Boys, who are kissing each other to get a little bit of attention online. And then if you go a little bit lower, you get to people like VM, who I don't even want to get into, but Rari kind of falls right between the Island Boys and VM. He's kind of on the level with people like King Yella and Skinny from the Nine, who are clout chasing as hard as they can, but they're not completely deranged like VM. Let me put it to you this way: if Icy Narco is a clone of Lil Pump, then Skinny from the Nine is a clone of Icy Narco, and Rari is a clone of Skinny from the Nine. A Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox, I think. I don't know. Anyways, basically, the guy is a clown. I made a video on him a long time ago. It's pretty shit. I might make a new one because I feel like people might be interested in the story, but either way, he became the manager for YBN Nahmir, and he immediately started fucking shit up for him because Aiden Ross would actually reach out to YBN Nahmir to do a boxing match with Almighty J, although Almighty J would back out for some reason, so instead he was supposed to box with a random Twitch streamer, and he was gonna pay him $20K for this. And considering just how far YBN Nahmir had fallen, it probably would be a good idea to take this on. I mean, after all, fuck the money. I mean, the money's good, I'd take $20K, but you need clout right now, and Aiden Ross is one of the biggest streamers in the world. So if you do this boxing event and it goes well, you might be able to book another fight and then another one, and you never know, you could have a comeback in some way. But apparently Aiden Ross ended up getting on the phone with Rari, and for some reason he decided that $20K was way too low and that the person that Nahmir was going to be fighting wasn't famous enough, so he asked for $100K, which of course Aiden immediately laughed in his face and hung up the phone, before then going on a live stream to say that YBN Nahmir fell off, he hadn't had a hit song in years, and that he wasn't even going to give him any more attention.
Nahmir, you're not worth $100,000. You fell off. You suck at music. You failed your music career. You know what I'm saying? I got nothing but, I got no disrespect to show but that. Nahmir, you're nothing. You're nobody. And your career sucks. You wanted 100 bands? He wanted 100 bands to fight.
You didn't even give Jay 100 bands.
You are nowhere near 100 bands. And again, Kick paid Cardi $2 mil. And hey, at least I got $2 mil to pay. You're broke.
But of course, Nahmir saw an opportunity to clout chase, so he would talk about it up and down, making Instagram stories, going on No Jumper once again to talk about it, where Rarioso said that he was the one who basically fucked up the deal. I mean, on the internet, all attention is good attention, but I really still feel like Nahmir should have taken the fight. I mean, maybe him and Aiden could have gone back and forth to build up hype for the fight, and then when he actually got in the boxing ring, it would have surprised everybody. But no, this was actually real, and well, it got him attention, but it was all negative. Nobody took his side, and everybody was still making fun of him for being fallen off. Although surprisingly, he would actually go on a Canada-wide tour after that, and it was pretty good. I mean, it looks like all the shows sold out, and while they're not the biggest venues in the world, it goes to show that Nahmir still has some form of a fan base, and he probably made some pretty good money off of that as well. So if he had done the boxing match, he might have been able to capitalize off that. But let's be honest, I think Nahmir is really just afraid to get punched in the face, which can't really blame him on that one. I probably wouldn't take the boxing match either. But it seems like Nahmir noticed that all this clout chasing bullshit could get him attention online, so he would start playing into the joke a little bit too late, with him posting a Rubbing Off the Paint Part 2 to try to clout chase off the success of a bygone era, as well as a Soul Train Part 2, which is just honestly kind of sad. But the real big news story that would follow up the whole Aiden Ross beef was the fact that he was finally going to be a father, but the person that he was having the baby with definitely wasn't the best candidate. It was a corn star known as Selena Powell, who's probably best known for sleeping with Adam 22 and Len of the Plug, as well as being a former girlfriend of DJ Academics. Her and Adam 22 used to have a podcast together that was kind of entertaining, mostly down to the fact that she's so dumb, and well, he's basically just dunking on her the entire time, although it got old pretty fast. But yeah, YBN Nahmir slept with her, he knocked her up, and that clout baby is coming sometime this year, so that's awesome. And while he definitely is getting attention off of this, once again, I feel like most people just think it's very sad. I mean, there's ways for you to get clout without knocking up a star, and to make matters even worse, before they ended up sleeping together, she was also sleeping with another corn star going by the name of Gucci Third Leg, and this guy apparently had open sores when he was shooting scenes. So yeah, I guess YBN Nahmir was willing to get gonorrhea if it meant that he could get a little bit of clout back. It's probably all the bad influence of Rari rubbing off on him, and well, I'm sure when that baby comes along, he's probably gonna get a bunch more attention. But when it comes to the music, the numbers, the reputation, and everything else, at this point, YBN Nahmir is basically looked at as a clown, which is kind of sad considering what he was like when he first started off, but at this point, it's kind of even hard to feel bad for him. I mean, a lot of the trolling that he went through in the late 2010s definitely wasn't his own fault, but once the 2020s rolled around, he really kind of made his own bed, and now he's laying in it. I mean, if that's the route he wants to take with his career, where he basically makes himself into a joke, I can fuck with that, but the way that he's doing it is even a little bit too much for me. I mean, while I don't really find Adam Killa funny whatsoever, he definitely found a pretty good sweet spot between being a meme and also being a kind of successful rapper, and if YBN Nahmir could kind of find himself in the same spot, he probably could be pretty successful. But at this point, I think he's closer to Skinny from the Nine and the Island Boys than any actual rapper. But at the very least, we can look at his story as a cautionary tale. I mean, everybody wants to be famous nowadays, but the things that people do to get that fame can sometimes really bite them in the ass later on in life. I mean, at least this guy didn't tattoo any stupid shit on his face, although to be honest with you, I wouldn't be surprised if he does in the next couple months to get some more attention. But it goes to show, blowing up too young in life without any real concept of what the music industry is, signing a big time deal, getting fucked over by all the management and people around you is gonna lead you into a bad spot. So if you really want to make music seriously and you really want to be a big time artist, please at least try to do your research of what it's gonna be like. It does seem like a pretty easy free meal ticket for you to be rich, famous, and have everything you want, but eventually the fame will die off, and if you haven't invested your money in the right places and you haven't built up a good reputation and a good fan base for yourself, well, you're gonna end up in a rough spot. Hey, but with all that said, shout out to my boy Case the Ace. He actually recently did a music video with YBN Nahmir for the track What's Up, and that was super dope to see. So yeah, shout out to him. He's going places. Nahmir, well, hopefully you're going places too, but right now they don't seem to be the best places. But with all that said, if you liked the video, make sure to subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to get to 30K, and we're starting to get close to that. I mean, you know what? I got to get my rise before I can have my fall off. So if you guys want to see me end up like YBN Nahmir, you got to give me some clout first. And yes, that Black Crave video is still coming. I'm sorry, just got busy recently. There's a lot going on, and there's going to be a lot going on after that. But hey, I'm working hard. I'm still popping these videos out. So I think it will be probably the next one. If not the next one, the one after that. Okay? You guys got my word. Hopefully. Maybe. I don't know. Bye.